Karen's hands shook as she approached her mailbox, her HOA violation book tucked under one arm like armor. Inside, wrapped in plastic, was a bloody tooth. Definitely human, definitely fresh. Attached was a note written in block letters. Stop the inspections, or at more. Well, hello. Absolutely not. Karen whispered to herself, her fear quickly morphing into the steely determination that had made her enemies throughout the neighborhood. Threats were just another form of bylaw violation, and Karen Whitmore didn't negotiate with violators. She marched back inside and called Detective Ray Kowalski, who she'd pestered countless times about residents' suspicious activities, which usually turned out to be perfectly legal barbecues or book clubs. This time, however, Ray's tone shifted when she mentioned human teeth. Stay inside, Karen. Don't touch anything else. I'm sending a unit over. While waiting, Karen did what she did best. She investigated. Her HOA violation database contained detailed records of every resident, including their complaints against her. Gerald Morrison topped the list with 17 violations in 6 months, followed closely by the Hendersons at 14. But as she scrolled through her meticulous notes, a pattern emerged that made her stomach drop. Every single resident who'd received more than 10 violations had experienced strange incidents lately. Mrs. Chen's prize roses had died overnight. The Patels' garbage cans kept getting knocked over. The Johnsons' sprinkler system had mysteriously broken, flooding their basement. Karen had dismissed these as coincidences or petty revenge, but now she wondered if someone was systematically targeting the families she'd been hardest on. The thought that her enforcement actions might have painted targets on innocent people's backs hit her like a physical blow. Detective Kowalski arrived with a crime scene team, treating her backyard like an actual crime scene for the first time in their long antagonistic relationship. As they worked, Karen found herself fidgeting with her measuring tape, a nervous habit that usually annoyed everyone around her. Karen, Ray said quietly, I need you to think carefully. Have you been getting any other threats? Anything unusual happening around your property? She wanted to maintain her usual dismissive attitude, but the genuine concern in his voice broke through her defenses. Someone's been moving my garden gnomes, she admitted. Just slightly, a few inches here and there. I thought it was kids, but you measure everything? Ray finished. So you'd notice. Every morning, it's like someone's testing me, seeing how much they can get away with before I react. As Ray took notes, Karen realized something that chilled her more than the teeth in her jacuzzi. Her obsessive attention to detail, the very trait that made her such an effective HOA enforcer, had made her the perfect target. Someone knew her routines, her blind spots, her triggers. They were playing with her the same way she'd been playing with the entire neighborhood. The crime scene team found more evidence: fiber samples, partial footprints, and most disturbing of all, a surveillance photo tucked under her welcome mat. It showed her measuring Mrs. Henderson's fence line, taken from an angle that suggested the photographer had been hiding in the drainage culvert. Whoever this is, Ray said grimly, they've been watching you for a while. Karen stared at the message, her mind racing through possibilities. Someone wanted to create a perfect community by eliminating both the enforcer and the troublemakers. But who had both the access to detailed HOA records and the twisted vision to see murder as community improvement? We need to evacuate everyone who's received multiple violations, she told Detective Kowalski over the phone. This isn't random harassment anymore. Someone's planning something for tonight. While Ray coordinated with patrol units, Karen did something that would have horrified her yesterday. She called an emergency neighborhood meeting and invited everyone, regardless of their violation status. Her living room filled with residents she'd spent years antagonizing, but for the first time, they were all united by something stronger than property value disputes: survival. I know I've been difficult, Karen began, the words tasting foreign in her mouth. I know my enforcement has caused problems between neighbors, but someone is using our conflicts to tear this community apart, literally. Mrs. Chen raised her hand tentatively. I've been thinking about those phone calls. The person knew things about my family that aren't in any public records. Private things, like they'd been in my house. Same here, added Mrs. Henderson. They knew about my daughter's college visits, my husband's work schedule. Too detailed for just outside observation. Karen felt pieces clicking into place. Someone with legitimate access to personal information. Someone we trust enough to let into our homes regularly. She paused, her throat tightening around the terrible possibility forming in her mind. Someone who works for the community. The room fell silent as the implication sank in. Then Gerald Morrison spoke up, the maintenance supervisor. Dave Kellerman. He has master keys to everything. Access to all our HOA files. Legitimate reasons to be on every property at all hours. Karen's heart sank. Dave had been working in Willowbrook for 3 years. Ever since the previous supervisor retired, he'd always seemed supportive of her enforcement efforts, even complimentary about her attention to detail. She trusted him with sensitive resident information, violation schedules, even her own daily routines. He always said this community could be perfect if people just followed the rules, she whispered. I thought he was supporting proper governance. Her phone buzzed again. Meeting DTST'd. Community gathering. With Olive Dripper PERMAHKs. VIRAHEA. CC Channeling 12.3a correction. Begins at Awu. Outside, the streetlights suddenly went dark in sequence, starting from the entrance to their cul-de-sac and moving toward Karen's house like a predator stalking its prey. Someone with access to the community's electrical systems was systematically cutting their power, trapping them in darkness. He's been planning this for months, Karen realized aloud. Using my enforcement to identify targets, using my routines to plan attacks, using my reputation to keep people from trusting each other enough to compare notes. Detective Kowalski's car pulled up just as the last streetlight died, its headlights cutting through the sudden darkness like a beacon of hope. But Karen could see another figure moving through the shadows between houses, someone who knew every inch of Willowbrook's layout well enough to navigate it blind. Everyone stay together, she commanded, falling back into her natural leadership role. If he wants a perfect community, he'll have to go through all of us first. But as sirens wailed in the distance and shadows moved closer to her house, Karen couldn't shake the feeling that Dave Kellerman had one final violation to address. Her own continued existence as the only person who truly understood how completely he'd infiltrated their perfect little world. The investigation was just beginning, and Karen suspected the teeth in her Jacuzzi had been merely his opening statement. Karen Whitmore's morning started with the kind of shock that would make any reasonable person question their life choices. As she descended to her backyard patio with her regulation HOA-approved coffee mug, she discovered what appeared to be actual human teeth, floating like tiny pearls in her pristine Jacuzzi water. What in the Sam Hill? She gasped, nearly dropping her mug. The teeth bobbed gently against the jets, 4 molars, and what looked suspiciously like an incisor, all unnaturally white and gleaming in the morning sun. Karen's first instinct wasn't to call the police. It was to check if her neighbor's fence was exactly 18 inches from the property line, as mandated by Section 4.7b of the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association bylaws. Because if Mrs. Henderson had moved that fence even a quarter inch overnight to dispose of mysterious dental evidence, Karen would have grounds for both a violation notice and a criminal complaint. She grabbed her measuring tape from the emergency HOA enforcement kit she kept by the sliding door, but froze when she spotted something even more disturbing. Footprints in her meticulously maintained street Augustine grass. Size 12 boots, by her estimation, leading directly from the Jacuzzi to the shared fence line with the Hendersons. This is a violation of at least 6 different bylaws, Karen muttered, her shock rapidly transforming into the righteous fury that had made her the most feared HOA board member in 3 counties. She pulled out her phone and began documenting everything with the methodical precision of someone who'd issued 247 violation notices in the past year alone. But as she snapped photos of the teeth, a chilling thought struck her. Last night's emergency HOA board meeting had been particularly heated. Gerald Morrison had practically threatened her when she'd insisted his garden gnome was 3 inches too tall. "You better watch yourself, Karen," he'd said with those cold gray eyes of his. People who stick their noses where they don't belong sometimes lose more than their authority. She'd laughed it off then, but now, staring at what might be Gerald's missing dental work, floating in her relaxation sanctuary, Karen felt the first flutter of genuine fear. Had her zealous enforcement of community standards finally pushed someone too far? Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Found something that belongs to you. Check your mailbox. Karen's blood ran cold. Whatever was happening, it wasn't over. And for the first time in her 5-year reign as HOA president, she wasn't sure she was in control of the situation. She clutched her violation notice book tighter, as if proper documentation could protect her from whatever storm was brewing in Willowbrook Estates. Karen refused protective custody with the same stubborn determination she used to enforce grass-height regulations. "I'm not running from some coward who threatens people with dental remains," she declared, clutching her citation book like a shield. "Besides, someone needs to maintain order in this community." Detective Kowalski looked like he wanted to argue, but after 5 years of dealing with Karen's complaints, he knew better than to waste energy on changing her mind. Instead, he stationed an unmarked car across the street and gave her his direct number. That evening, Karen did something she'd never done before. She actually talked to her neighbors like human beings instead of walking violations waiting to happen. Starting with Mrs. Henderson, whose fence had sparked this morning's measuring ritual. "Oh, honey," Mrs. Henderson said, her hostility melting into genuine concern when Karen explained the situation. "I've been getting weird phone calls, heavy breathing, then someone whispering about community standards. I thought it was you harassing me about my garden gnomes." The revelation hit Karen like a slap. "Why would you think I'd do that?" "Well, you did threaten to have my gnomes removed for being aesthetically inconsistent with neighborhood values," Mrs. Henderson replied with a wry smile. But listening to that voice on the phone, it wasn't you. Too deep, too angry. Like someone really genuinely hated everything about this place. Karen felt a flush of shame. Had she really become so associated with harassment that neighbors automatically blamed her for anonymous threats? "I may be strict about the bylaws," she said quietly, "but I'd never resort to anonymous intimidation." "I know that now," Mrs. Henderson said. "Whoever this is, they're different. Dangerous." Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion 3 houses down. Gerald Morrison was standing in his front yard, shouting at his garden gnome, which had apparently been moved again, this time placed in an obscene position that violated at least 4 community decency standards. "This is insane," Gerald yelled when he saw Karen approaching. "Someone keeps messing with my property, and now there's teeth in your hot tub? What kind of neighborhood are we running here?" Karen found herself in the surreal position of comforting Gerald Morrison, a man she'd cited for violations ranging from unauthorized bird feeders to improper mailbox reflective tape. As they talked, she realized something crucial. Gerald had been getting the same mysterious phone calls as Mrs. Henderson. So had the Chens, the Pattles, and the Johnsons. Every family she'd cited extensively was being stalked by someone who seemed to know their schedules, their routines, their vulnerabilities. Someone who'd been watching not just her, but the entire community she tried so hard to control. "It's like they're cleaning house," Gerald said grimly. "Getting rid of anyone who's had problems with the HOA. Karen's blood chilled as the implication hit her. "You think someone's trying to eliminate HOA disputes by eliminating the people involved in them? Think about it, Karen. You're the enforcement arm. We're the troublemakers who keep challenging you. Remove all of us, and what's left is a perfectly compliant community with no one to question the rules." As if summoned by their conversation, Karen's phone buzzed with another anonymous text. "The inspections end tonight. Will allow BRO will be PF East